So good afternoon, everyone attending this webinar about process intelligence for accelerating your successful automation in 2019. This is Ryan Raker from Timeline PI. On the call today, we have Joe Rayfield and Alex Deibler, who are going to go through a demonstration as well as some of background information about what Timeline PI does for your digital transformation initiatives, helping you accelerate your initiatives in 2019 and making you successful in your digital transformation initiatives. Some housekeeping items here. At the end, we will have some questions. We'll leave about 15 minutes for questions. If you're viewing on the page here, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner is a live chat box. We'll be taking any questions through that area. So you can click that little button. It's orange chat box, pull it up, put in your name and your email, and we'll be able to accept those questions and answer those live on air near the end of this webinar. If you are having any trouble with viewing the live feed, please do the same. Send a message in that same chat box in the lower right-hand corner. We're going to wait just one more minute for some of the late stragglers. You can see here there's still people signing in, and we'll get started shortly. We have some guests who have sent in that they cannot see the chat box. If you cannot see the chat box, just give your page a refresh. In the bottom right-hand corner, you should be able to see the orange chat box, and we'll be able to accept messages through there. Okay, it looks like we have a decent amount here signed in. Those who had some issues seems to be figuring those out. We're getting everybody in here. I'd like to introduce you to Joe Rayfield, the head of business development and sales for Timeline PI. You're going to get started with this presentation in this webinar.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Joe Rayfield and I'm in charge of field operations for Timeline PI, and I'm currently joined with Alex Deibler, to be honest, who is the real brains of this outfit. He's going to spend most of today's session walking through a live demonstration of how Process Intelligence Platform can significantly reduce the costs and accelerate the success of both short and long-term automation strategies. Firstly, I just wanted to reach out and thank everyone for joining. Maybe history should tell us otherwise, but we're always still stunned at the amount of interest there is in this topic, and hope that you'll gain value out of what you see today. I'd like to also take a moment to thank our value partner, Blue Prism, for supporting this event and truly believing in the value of timeline analysis with regards to creating success for their customer base. I'm a big fan of their connected RPA vision and also the digital exchange, which of course we're a part of. On a personal note, my belief is that today you'll be introduced to a type of technology that within a couple of years will truly be table stakes for every enterprise. It's going to support all of the business processes, including all efforts around digital transformation, process optimization, and of course the topic of today's call, successful and sustainable automation. And believe me, the last thing I want to do is bore you in PowerPoint today. I think that would significantly detract from the visualization capabilities of Timeline PI as a platform. But I'm going to set a quick scene as to what Process Intelligence Platform provides, the undoubtable promise of RPA, and finally the intersection points and value add that process intelligence brings to significantly reducing the cost of successful and, of course, future-proofed robotic process automation. To start in slide 1, I'm going to try and compact roughly 25 to 30 years of process and analytics experience into 2 minutes. So I'm sure my co-founders are crying into their low-fat lattes, but if you humour me, it should clearly direct how we approach some specific cost and time inhibitors to RPA. Realistically, to me, intelligent journey is an essential business strategy around understanding, analysing, monitoring, and predicting on process behaviours. Again, as I said, for operational performance in the next 24 months. If I just walk you very briefly through the journey as to how we see the process intelligence space. Step 1, we create an interactive digital twin. So our powerful process mining engine collects existing data from any number of back-end systems to create a living and interactive digital twin. This is certainly not a Visio that remains static and often gets lost. It's going to be an ongoing living visualization of every process instance and every variation of process execution, with, of course, variability being such a huge part of choosing the right candidates for automation. Once we have our interactive digital twin, we're going to add BI-type analytics strictly related to process. Before you start, BI cannot do process analytics. Believe me, we tried for many years in our last company, which was a BI company, but it just has no concept of a temporal series of events. A process intelligence platform like Timeline PI provides you with over 25 automatically generated process analysis modules, which are all designed to answer very specific questions around process execution, and also to clearly identify opportunities for optimization and hence automation. Think of this as the diagnostic analysis to add and augment to any existing BI efforts. Step 3 is actually becoming more and more important to all of our automation initiatives. Don't backslide and make sure you're continuously improving. If we've spent the time and the money assessing, analyzing, optimizing a process, let's make sure that they stay fixed forever. As Peter Drucker always said, let's manage through measurement. A process intelligence platform enables us to monitor for optimal process execution at all times, making sure that both our people and the digital workers are running at peak performance levels. And best of all, continually building out our timing and cost ROIs automatically. And finally, if we have all of this historic process patterns trained into a process intelligence platform, we can start to very early in process sequence understand when something will happen, what will happen, and how it will affect the outcome of the total process. Can you imagine the power of knowing that you're going to provide a loan or not in the first 5 steps of the loan process? What about knowing that you're going to have to admit? What could we start spawning digital workers to improve any of these outcomes? If we start pulling together in prediction and prescription, we're getting to the holy grail of what a true process intelligence platform can deliver. But what about RPA? Now, no matter how much I've excited you about process intelligence, this webinar is based on how we support the cheaper, faster, and more intelligent and more successful RPA deployments. But what is the real RPA opportunity? Now, I've put a load of things on the screen here, and as you probably all know, there is no doubt that RPA has landed and is here to stay. But let's be honest in admitting that while we're still relatively early, it's in maturity, which of course is extremely exciting. You can see there is almost an unprecedented surge of activity. There's more statistics available out there than you can shake a stick at, with the majority showing how groundbreaking it's going to be. And of course, my goodness, we're going to save absolute bisquillions of dollars. But I would still suggest, however, that most conversations I have on a daily basis revolve around the huge potential of RPA, the future of RPA, but also that the majority are still looking for a way to get above 10 to 50 digital workers and how we're going to make them more intelligent. Now, please take a breath. Don't write to me with your few stories of 1,000+ robots. I know of them too, but they are most definitely a rare beast. So I'd prefer it if we gave no one on this phone a severe robo-complex before we've even got going. For me, I've been in the space for a long time, and I believe that the revolution started in the fact that RPA is allowing us to be very focused on specific problem solving. Certainly the early days, we're not looking at the 3 or 4 year ROI calculations for BPM projects that involve multiple layers of approval and multi-departmental buy-in. And this is where it all really started. Although I do raise the caution, this is out, who is managing this at a corporate level, as there are certainly inherent risks in creating solutions in silos. My days and the ungoverned data discovery, where you get 5 people attaching to 5 different Excel spreadsheets and providing you with 5 extremely different results to the same question, even though they'll be showing you them in an extremely beautiful dashboard. I suppose I say this as I believe we're going to be, if we're going to be completely successful with automation, we need to make sure that it is strategic, well planned out, and controlled. So as I say to my wife often, please do not take this as me being negative. I find this revolution extremely exciting, and there is no one believes in all of this more than me. And I strongly believe that it should not be long before we all have an army of AI-infused digital workers. But I certainly do want to raise the fact that we need to make sure we have a strategy around our robotic deployments, one that is efficient, one that can scale, and one that is governed. So what's this section about? How do we support this revolution? Where does process intelligence interject with automation? And how can it end up, of course, what this call is around, saving us a significant amount of time and money on this imperative journey? It's very simple. We provide the bookends of efficient automation, covering 2 of the biggest inhibitors to accelerated and widespread adoption of automation. And I will say, having been with Blue Prism at Blue Prism World, they were both certainly 2 of the biggest pain points that I was hearing last year. The first one, how do I know what to automate next and why? What will give me my biggest bang for buck? Can I project the potential time and cost savings if I automate specific steps? Which process improvements will have the biggest positive effect for my customer? And maybe how quickly can I qualify myself out of an RPA candidate? This is critical. Qualify out very early if the candidate is not appropriate for RPA. The second major area that we support is, how do we know that it is all working? It's about the follow-up, the measuring of the success of our deployments, making sure that you're meeting your predefined automation targets. Are you hitting your ROIs? If not, why not? Are the robots running effectively? Are they completing their expected paths? How does the automation affect the rest of the business process? This is absolute. And how do we control elements of your process that extend beyond the automation itself? And the secret sauce of all this is, how do we do it in a cost-effective, data-driven manner? How do we do this now? It's predominantly manual. It's manual assessment, which is time-consuming, costly, subjective, and can be extremely error-prone. I was recently with an account whereby they were quoting that 65 to 70% of their time was spent assessing business processes, and only 30 to 35% of their time was actually involved in automating. Now, what's wrong with this picture? Process intelligence will strongly assist this and address this problem, and will go a long way to hopefully flipping these numbers on their heads. And, you know, I've put some kind of metrics up on the board here. I'm not going to argue these definitively. I'm not going to debate if it takes 4 or 2 weeks to do a process assessment. I'm sure that they can all be different, and I'm not arguing whether it's 2 to 3 weeks to arrange a project kickoff, and realistically whether it's $19,099 or $20,000 to enable people to go and do these tasks is not the point of the slide. The point of the slide to me is, we live in a digital age. The manual approach to our problem is old and tired. We're looking to support its acceleration and improve our automation initiatives through data-driven insight. I want to do 20 assessments in the same time as you can currently do one. The intelligent automation hearing so much about. Again, this is not replacing people, consultants. This is about making them more effective on their RPA journey. Bookend one, as I discussed, digitally driven process intelligence is quicker, cheaper, and automatic. As you can imagine, as I'm only dealing with a temporal series of events, I'm dealing with processes. We've all been involved in Lean and Six Sigma. We know exactly what you want to know about a temporal series of events. We've been doing it manually for years. It's about bottlenecks, throughput challenges, process sequencing, missteps, repeated steps. Over 75% of what people want to know is automatically generated in a process intelligence platform. So we're going to show you a lot of these modules that really point the finger at where there are opportunities for automation. I come back to my process of a digital twin. I personally believe it will not be long before our customers expect this to be a part of their everyday operational performance. Our process analysis component acts as the smoking gun to opportunities for automation. Discovery and assessment is about automatically identifying, justifying, prioritizing what processes we're taking on and why, and creates that digital twin baseline that can be monitored and measured in perpetuity. Now, I have my interactive twin. I have analyzed and assessed what to take on and why. We have brought our digital workforce to augment and improve our process. We go back, what do? We go back to manually trying to monitor and measure that success. Again, not if you have the digital twin baseline. For digital workers, I want to know that I'm hitting my ROI targets. I want to know that the working is expected. I need to understand the exceptions. For the full end-to-end process, I want to understand what effect the digital workforce is having on the rest of my process. I want to make sure that I'm not just creating bottlenecks further down the process flow, potentially sensible compliance. I want to find other opportunities for more automation and more effectiveness and to continually improve my process. And finally, and really importantly, I want to be alerted if anything goes wrong. And I want this to all be automated. If I want the rules of my process to trigger alerting in real time, if something goes wrong with my digital workforce, I want to know now. If something goes wrong downstream, I want to receive a notification by text or email. If I detect a business condition outside of a robot's control, like no background check or fraud check or credit check or whatever it may be, I want to spawn a digital worker to fix my problem. And finally, if I predict a specific outcome of a process, what can I do to improve the potential outcome with automation? All of this needs to be automated. All of this stems from my interactive digital twin. We've got to measure performance levels after and really push towards those thousands and thousands of robots. Now, I know this may sound a little bit like Minority Report, but believe me, we need to plan for all of this. We need to build out libraries of interactive digital twins so we can push towards continuous and sustainable automation. And now, talking of a Minority Report, I'll hand over to Alex to show you of the power of the platform supporting your RPA strategy.
All right, thank you, Joe. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Deibler, and I'm a senior solutions consultant here with Timeline PI. I'm going to be walking you through the Timeline PI solution in the context of these bookends of automation that Joe has just outlined for us. Okay, and in bookend number one, the first slide, Joe mentioned that Timeline PI is really automatic. And so I kind of want to back up that claim. Anybody can say those words, but really being able to prove it in the technology is where you can drive the point home. Now, since we give you so much insight directly upon loading data, let's go through a project as if we're getting started from scratch. All right, so we'll go through the simplest form of getting some data into the tool and running through some of the examples around our process intelligence and insights. So I'm going to start by browsing out to a file. that has some events related to the processing of credit card applications. So that's going to be the business context for the demonstration we go through. We're going to be tracking customer credit card applications as they go through a credit card processor's onboarding journey to where they're either approved or denied that card. All right, so we've introspected the file. Each row here represents a single event that's occurred as a part of processing these credit card applications. And what I want to key here on is the 3 fields that we require. We require only 3 data points in order to get started in visualizing and analyzing the business process. First and foremost, we need a timestamp that simply tells us when any given event has occurred. Next, we're going to want to make sure we have a process identifier. Now, we call this the timeline ID, but this is going to be the unique key that joins together all the different events that occur as a part of a credit card application into that context. So probably in this use case, we would be using an application number. But if we're tracking insurance claims, it's a claim number, invoices, invoice ID, healthcare patients, patient number. So these are the kinds of data points that we're looking for that signify what we're tracking and measuring. And then the last field we'll want to make sure we have is an event or activity name. What happened to the application at that point in time? And you can see some examples here. So really, this is an audit trail. This is the way you can think of the data that we're looking for. It's an audit trail or log of all the actions that took place in any given system of record responsible for supporting the business process. Now you can see these fields I've got in purple, which are going to be your attributes or dimensions, ways that you may want to slice and dice and filter, really give more context to your analysis. So when you find something interesting, you might want to know who the processor was or the type of card, what region it came for, etc. So these are going to allow you to look at things like root cause analysis once you've uncovered an interesting scenario. Now I should mention, and I think I pointed it out briefly, but this is the easiest and most straightforward way of loading data into the tool manually. We can automate this loading process when it comes to a production scenario. Not to mention, we've recently released capability along with Blue Prism to be able to automatically and in real time ingest data from Blue Prism robots. So not only can we take these business events from your line of business systems, but if we're looking to either distinctly analyze your existing digital workforce, we can do that by loading those robotic events, and while also commingling that with some of the different manual steps that are a part of your business process as well, to give you that full picture across all the human-oriented tasks and then the handoffs with technology, and giving you that full picture from end to end. Okay, so we can load across all those different multiple systems of record, provided we can join to this common process identifier, and that's shared across all your different data sets. Now, once I've got my data mapped, as you can see here, what I would do is hit confirm and start upload, allow the tool to begin reconstituting the process based on these events. This file itself takes it's a trivial amount of time to load the data, less than 30 seconds. In that amount of time, we're building out all the models and forms of analysis to present that we'll go through with you right now. So first things first, we're presented with this overview page, which are good high-level statistics about the data set we've loaded, giving us some insights about our onboarding process. How many events came out of our file? How does that relate to the number of timelines? In this case, a timeline is going to be synonymous with an instance of a customer's application. We've got 18 different events. So via the 18 events link, we're starting to understand all the different events that could be occurring as a part of processing these applications. And not only that, but what I think is even more important, how commonly is any given event happening? Some happening much more frequently than others. Okay, and so you get an idea now not only of what's happening, but what's happening most often. Now, you'll see as we go through this, I've got a couple of icons that I've assigned here to be used as opposed to the default circle with the number in it. This is just one piece of configuration I've done, okay? You can upload your own, use coloring. The idea being just to make it visually apparent to the end user what's happening with these applications immediately when they log into the tool. But most everything else has been done here automatically for me. Okay, so realistically, I'll point out the places where I've done some configuration, but you've got things like average and range of duration of the process. How many events go into processing our applications? What's the cost? Now I have input some cost statistics here for this example, but what this is telling us is a full population cost metric along with on a per application average basis, how costly is it for us to process these credit card applications. And then the last thing to point out, where do we both begin and finish our onboarding process most commonly? And you get a full breakdown of where we're starting and ending in case that's important. Now, what I want to move to next is the ability to visualize the process, build that digital twin. Okay, and we can do that using, first and foremost, our Schema module, which gives us a good high-level perspective as to what my onboarding application process looks like. Okay, so here I've got a schema that's been built out. You've got the ability to build multiple models here with varying levels of complexity, where certain models you might want to only include a few high-level events, and with others you may want to include more detail and more events. But what you can see here is I've got not only the ability to look at my process visualized from end to end, but I've got the volumes of any different transition from one step to another, understanding where applications are going more oftentimes one way versus another. If I don't want to look at it from a volume perspective, I can change my metric here to the right and start to focus more on time. What's the average duration? And you can see the line thickness represents where I'm taking more time on average to complete one part of the process versus another. And we can even go a step further to say, I really am interested in not only volume and time and just visualizing my process, but what does throughput look like? So we can animate this model. Now, when I turn this on, each circle represents a customer application or a group of them, and you actually visualize their procedure through the process where things speed up and slow down. As you see things bunching up in certain cases, that's creating a visual bottleneck. Certain areas you may want to focus further on. Changing of colors means they're aging. These are applications that have been in the process for a longer period of time. So again, this gives you a good high-level perspective, not only as to what the process looks like, where time's being spent. Maybe you can pinpoint some certain segments or areas that you may want to further investigate utilizing any one of the 26 different analysis modules here on the right. Now, while I'm over here, I will point out 26 different analysis modules, each one designed to answer a specific type of process-related question. So I'll probably get time to touch on 4 or 5 of these in today's call. But each one of these has been specifically crafted and engineered to answer a question that we felt you could not get any other way using any other type of a tool. Now, coming back to this schema representation, again, this is a nice high-level view as to how this process is operating. What this doesn't take into account is the variability, the consistency with which the process is executed. Okay, and so what this works well for are pretty well-defined, well-behaved processes that are usually governed by a lot of technology, right, and business rules. What it doesn't work well for are the more highly variable, more complex, more type of ad hoc processes that we tend to come across more so in the real world. Those that don't fit into a single model, that have more variation. As soon as you start to add all those levels of variation to this type of a view, it becomes a spider web of lines and almost really, really difficult to digest and use analytically. All right. And so what we've done to combat that issue of more messy real world type of processes is developed a number of different analysis modules, starting with our path analysis, aimed at giving you that idea about variability and consistency. And this is going to become key as you start to think about automation. All right. So what you're looking at here is a frequency distribution of all of our different process execution steps or behaviors, with the most commonly followed here to the left. So what it's telling us is along the top, you've got the number of applications which have gone one way versus another way relative to the steps that you have listed here. Okay. Now I can scroll this to the right and see exactly how many different process execution patterns we've got. This gives you that view on the consistency. And when we're starting to think about building out a digital workforce around any given part of a process, consistency is absolutely going to be a key metric. The more consistent your process is, the more of a candidate it's going to become for automation. The more variable it is, the more of these different possible pathways, you have to essentially account for each and every one of these different behaviors when you're thinking about bringing up and coding out any one of those digital workers. And you have to take that into account. Otherwise, if you don't account for it, it's eventually going to become a problem down the line where you're not able to process certain things or you're receiving errors. So a lot of times what you'll see is these paths will stretch beyond 50 different execution patterns. And that's real world. The processes tend to be more highly variable than even we initially will think. This happens to be a pretty consistently executed process. I would say this would be one that would be ripe to look for automation, and that there are only 12 different pathways. And so you can clearly pick out those behaviors, exactly what's happening in sequence, and we can even relate those to how long they take. So how long does it take us on average when we process an application, one set of steps versus another? So you've got your most common path here taking 3 days, almost 4 days, and we can compare that against the others. We can even visualize this a bit differently. This may be a nice view for linear type of workflows, but if we like that schema representation, we've got that same analysis just broken out visually based on that schema type of model. Okay, and we can see where branching occurs and where loopback and rework may happen. Now, there's a number of different ways to compare, right? We can look at the amount of time we take, how consistent the process is executed. If you want to look at this through a compliance lens, making sure everything is done and it's done in order. We can also compare these behaviors based on how costly they've become. So what is the average cost to me as a processor when we choose to send an application one way versus another? So now we're bringing the bottom line to bear as a part of this comparative analysis. And we say, let's focus on those that are inherently costing us the most, because that's what I'm concerned about in this case. Okay, well, what I can actually do here is select one or more of these pathways and focus in on them by applying that as a filter. Okay, as soon as I choose to set that filter, now the rest of my analysis, you see I've got it set here and we're focused in on just these 615 that exhibited that high cost behavior. The rest of my analysis going forward is going to be scoped around these 615 high cost applications. My metrics have now flexed. Any of the other tools or modules that I move to are going to show me results in context of these 615 high cost applications. Now, we've seen a couple of different perspectives on the process. We looked at the schema, which was our high-level kind of digital twin representation. We've got the variability and consistency and time and cost here within path. Now, we've even got the capability to go down to a single process instance in our timelines. So each horizontal line here represents a separate customer application. The icons I pointed out earlier are representing the steps that have occurred along the way. And now we can go as granular as looking at a single instance of a process if we have a need to do that. So here I'm looking at timeline or application number X, and I've got my full end-to-end view as to what happened with this specific application. I've got my interrelated steps, how long we took in between these time gaps, who was associated with it. So I've got all that attribute related data here for me as well, the processor, the type of card, the region, and these would all be driven by the customer system of record, right? Those fields you would be interested in analyzing based off. But again, a very deep and granular perspective on this process where we've come from that high level schema. Okay, and so this level of depth is inherently available to you across the entire population. Now, what I'll do is I quickly want to point out, since I mentioned when we were loading data, that root cause analysis. Now that we've segmented or scoped by filtering down to these 615 high cost processes, I may be curious about how that trends based on some other attribute that I've loaded. All right, so we've got our breakdown view that can maybe point us in the direction to where this issue may be tend to occur more frequently than others. This is where we use those attributes to say, okay, of these 615 high cost applications, how do they break down by, let's say, region? Any rhyme or reason to the region that they're actually coming from? And it's actually a pretty even distribution, as you can see here. Let's pivot it and say, let's actually look at it by person, the processor responsible for handling the application. And it's a bit more compelling in this case, right? Because I got a single person that's responsible for a large percentage of the high cost application. So conceptually here, we want to start to point you in the direction of, hey, what location seems to always be responsible? Or is it a piece of technology that's always involved when we see this certain type of behavior occur, right? This way, we're not only uncovering that we have an issue or something that we need to address, but we're now focusing our efforts in a specific area, right? Making it actionable, if you will. Okay. So let's pivot now and we'll talk a little bit about time. All right. So we looked at time a little bit when we saw the schema and the average duration in our path analysis. But when we're talking about automation efforts and automating specific tasks, we may want to get a little bit more detailed around exactly where time is being incurred in the process. Our bottleneck analysis is focused on exactly that. We're not looking at the overall end-to-end duration here. In this case, we want to look at specific tasks or activities and understand how much each and every one of these is contributing to the overall processing time of each and every customer's credit card application. Okay, so we've got a couple of different ways to calculate time here, whether we want to look at the amount of time it takes us to go from one event to the next. On the flip side of that, the amount of time it takes from us to go to any prior event up to our event. Or we can have the system group together events for us, and I'll talk about costs in a minute. But what this is doing is giving you event groupings, essentially event transitions, and breaking them down, showing you how often and how much time it takes to do any of these different event transitions. So it's sorted right now based on how commonly any transition occurs by count. So our top one is a processor being assigned to process an application until that person then does an initial verification of that customer. That's happened 2,500 plus times. And you can go on down the list from here. That's 77% of our timelines contain this transition, giving us an average of 28 hours on average for us to complete that task. That rolls up to a total of almost 71,200 hours that we've spent in this stage of our process. And as a percent of all the time that we've spent processing applications across our entire population, we'd want to know how much of it is spent in any given stage. So I like sorting on this metric, high to low. And what this essentially is showing you is a stack ranking of your most costly event transition or tasks from a time perspective. Right. And of course, returning hours to the business is going to be a key metric when it comes to looking for automation candidates. This is automatically going to give you really a prioritization list to understand more about what's happening at any given stage here. And we want to start high to low. In this case, there's nothing even close to this top one, almost 23%. And if we're talking about a verification that happens to be an existing customer check or maybe a third-party credit validation, right? That's something that inherently automation could help with. So we would absolutely look at this as something that we can drive down utilizing automation. So let's start to understand exactly how much time we stand to gain. And let's be modest and say, if we drop our average time on this task from 28 hours, let's just say to 24 hours on average. Just drive a small percentage of this time out with automation. We can start to see dynamically exactly the amount of hours we stand to return back to our knowledge workers and making that type of improvement. So it allows you to justify and start to benchmark for these goals that you're looking to hit in any kind of a process improvement effort. Okay. So this revolves around time and time savings and obviously allowing you to prioritize those tasks that you go after for automation. We can also look at this from a cost perspective. So where's the bulk of our cost incurred as a part of our process? And where can we start to understand cost, realize cost improvements here? And which one should we go after from a cost basis? So the same type of analysis and the same type of what if analysis based around cost. All right, so I'm going to jump ahead briefly, and in the interest of time, move ahead to almost as if we're now moving from a pre-process assessment phase to that second bookend, which is your post-process quantification and understanding the work that's been done. So I'm going to bring up our side-by-side analysis, which allows us to compare and contrast any two different sets of data. In this case, what I've got is a pre-implementation set of data and a post-implementation set. Now, I like to call this, it's really the customer's insurance policy for the work that they're going to be doing. You don't want to take on some kind of automation effort, go do the work, and then just cross your fingers, close your eyes, and hope that you're getting the results that you expected or that you shot for, right? You'd want to be able to quantify the work that's been done so that if you hit the mark, hey, you get the pat on the back, you can go champion it throughout the organization. We're talking about process automation adoption here. Nothing speaks better than a successful automation effort, right? So we want to know that. On the flip side of that, we want to know if we didn't hit the mark, right? You'd want to have visibility to say, hey, we're not getting the return that we expected. It's back to the drawing board. Or maybe we need to scrap this project altogether and not waste our time or any further hours and money going forward with this because we're just not getting the results. Either way, you'd want to have that quantifiable evidence and results. So what you've got here is a pre-implementation, basically our set of data we did our pre-process assessment on. And how does that compare since we went into production with our digital workforce? What was our duration pre and post? Well, that dropped nicely. What about our ROI? What about the cost? What was our cost pre and post? So this ability to compare against a pre and post type of analysis can be really, really useful in not only understanding where you've come from, but where you've got to. And if we just kick a bottleneck down a couple of systems, we'll be able to uncover that iteratively as time goes on. We're going to see that manifest itself in the data and the analysis that we be doing on an ongoing basis. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of other features here quickly. The first being the ability to ask even more specific types of questions about your business process. So once you're through that discovery phase, maybe now you have a certain scenario that you're curious if it may or may not be happening. And this could even be utilized, and I've seen it utilized in the discovery phase when you're still kind of getting your arms around the process and what makes sense for automation. So I'll talk through that. But our query module is designed to allow you to ask more specific kind of pattern and sequence-based questions, again, that you're not going to be able to get an answer to in any other way. Excel, BI, if you're familiar with process mining, even other process mining tools out there, they really don't have a way of simply answering these types of questions. So I'll build out a scenario and we'll walk through it. Now, if I'm curious, how often do we receive an application, then go on to assign somebody to process it? All right, so I'm building out our event sequence here that I expect or don't expect as we go. And then secondarily, what I would expect is that person to run a fraud credit check on the application or applicant prior to making the offer of a card. That seems logical, right? We would expect this sequence of steps to happen almost every time. What I'm curious about is how often do we fail to do this? So we receive it, assign somebody to do it, they never do the fraud credit check, yet somehow still make the offer of a card out to that applicant. That would obviously be a big time risk and something we would never expect to occur. So we can build out, as you can see, things happening in order, out of order, not happening at all. We can also look at things like repetition here. And again, this is another area where you might want to look at things. Manual steps repeating could be good candidates for automation, that we get it done the first time the right way. But we can look at, hey, how many times do we have 2 or 3 or more people assigned to an application, yet they still fail to do this? And we can also look at the amount of time in between steps, whether it took us more or less than any given time frame to get from one stage to the next. Along with these attribute values getting specific, I think the point that I'm making here is these questions can get very specific, very complex, and it's very, very easy to build them out. I just logically ask a business question. And again, you can't answer this any other way. And I build it out here graphically in my editor. I build out the logic. I search. Everything here is designed to be sub-second response. And I get a return that tells me, yes, you did or did not have that has happening. In this case, we've got 104 applications that actually had that type of sequence occur. And we'd be off and running and understanding more about exactly how that happened, who was associated, so on and so forth. Now, this is a nice retroactive view and gives us the ability to do ad hoc type of analysis and just quickly building in a question and searching on it. We've also got the concept of protocols, which is almost the inverse of that query logic. If the query is a search mechanism, build out your logic and then start to understand where things that are matching that. Our protocol allows you to, on the flip side of that, build in rules, expectations, your best practices. Maybe you have an SLA or some compliance law that mandates you do a certain amount of steps within a given time frame. Well, what you would do is you build that in here as a protocol. And instead of showing where you match, right, where you follow protocol, because that's what you expect, right? You wouldn't necessarily be concerned about that. This is where we get the inverse of the query. You would want to see where you don't match, where you violate. So you build in your expectations here, and you can build in whole libraries of these protocols around specific segments of the process. All right, we saw from that path analysis, there's not one quote unquote happy path for completing a process, and there never is. And typically there's not even 10 or 15, there's more than that. But there may be certain scenarios when I hit this stage, we must do X, Y, and Z within a given time frame. In this case, every time we receive an application, I want to make sure it goes through a couple of different stages, but within 2 days, somebody's assigned to it. Otherwise, what we've seen is our customer sat score goes way down, right? If we don't get somebody assigned to that within this time frame. All right. Now we can also look at this retroactively. So we can come in here and show violations. This is going to show me based on my historical data where we violated this protocol. All right. And all the different root causes as to how and why it was violated. You missed a step. You had a time violation. Something happened out of order. And I can drill in using that filtering mechanism to any one of these to uncover the actual instances that made up that specific violation. Now, the other thing to mention with query and protocol, and this is important, is that these are where it was set up to drive our monitoring and alerting aspect of the tool. So maybe I don't want to look at this retroactively, as I've been saying. Maybe I want to know proactively prior to us not running a fraud credit check or us breaching some kind of an SLA or that 2-day best practice time threshold. I want to know so I can step in and actually make a change. All right. So you build in that logic into your queries and protocol, and we can have that drive our alerting mechanism. You simply build out how you want to be notified, whether it's a missing fraud check. And of course, I would want to know far upstream from us offering a card that we didn't run a fraud check, so I can step in and do that before we make that kind of an action on the application. But we can be notified, whether that be via text message, I can notify a person, or email. Right, so we can step in and make sure we're handling it. And this is a new feature that we've just released, and it's directly integrated with Blue Prism. We've got the ability to send out a web service call to a downstream application aimed at beginning to remediate the issue that we've uncovered without ever having to involve a human. Okay, and so we're talking about getting as close to closed loop issue remediation as possible. And again, if we're talking about something that's like running a fraud credit check on somebody, I mean, inherently, that's something that a robot could do for us. So why not uncover that issue or just have a trigger in Timeline PI, which says when we hit this stage, fire off this web service call to my Blue Prism bot, and I can actually show you this running. So as I bring up my alert and I test this, what I'm going to do is switch over to my Blue Prism server. You're going to see this robot get picked up in real time and actually execute on the sequence of steps that I've designed it for. All right, and so this type of integration is really, really valuable in getting as close to this automated resolution stage as possible. Okay, the last thing that I'm just going to quickly show you here is a bit of a different type of a visualization, but it's the capability to maybe involve somebody who's not a deep, low-level analyst that's not in here looking at timelines and all the different things that I've showed you and then some, but more of that business role. Okay, they still probably want to have an idea of what's happening, also be able to get results on the automation efforts. And so we've got a dashboarding tool here, which again, this is not designed to be a replacement for your BI tool. It's simply just a more familiar way for business users to come in here and keep and have surfaced up this process related intelligence. right? And so you can see some metrics here that would be, and the visualizations that pretty much anybody can come in here and get an idea of exactly how the operation was working without having to be some process improvement expert. Okay, so I think I've hit my time here. Ryan, I will send it back to you. If we've got any questions for Joe or I, we can certainly take those. Ryan, are you with us? I think you might be muted.
Yeah, sorry about that, Alex. I'm here now, so let's get some of these questions. We had quite a few that came in. For any of those who may have questions but couldn't find the chat box, there were some that couldn't find that chat box. Right down in the right-hand corner, there's an orange circle. You can click that. That's the chat box to send your questions over here now. So one that we have that showed up here is, they mentioned you showed operational costs, but how do you go about including those as part of the analysis? So in reference to costs that they would have in their operation, how do you go about making that a part of the analysis?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. And in the interest of time, I didn't go deeply into it, but I'll certainly touch on it. So there is no expectation here that you would have a field in your data set that has line-by-line costs for your activities. That's obviously just not realistic. So what we give you the capability to do is define costs directly here within the platform. And they happen to be event-based costs. So whether they event be fixed and or time variable based. So you've got your cost module, and the nice thing here, we don't need to define costs for each and every step of the process. We're not using this as an accounting system where we need second decimal point type of specificity here. So we can define the cost for the events that we have, and over time we can add to and enrich that. But we do give you quite a few different options for defining those. So here's our data capture cost, and this is just an example case, right? But I could say every time we do this, there's a fixed cost of a specific amount and define that there. If I do have that data as a part of an input in a file, I can take that out of a field in my data set, or I can bring in a lookup table to do relational costing, which says if it's this type of document, it costs us X versus another type, it costs us Y. If we do this task domestically, it costs us a certain amount. If we do it offshore, it costs us that. So we have the ability to get pretty specific around relational type of costing. When one role does it, it costs us this amount. If we escalate it, it costs us more, of course. So we have that option for fixed along with time variable based. So the amount of time that a step stays open or active costs us a certain amount per hour. And you have much the same type of options here, just defining a specific time interval for how long it took. So that's how we get the operational cost and have the capability to give you these cost metrics along the top, along with path, among other areas where cost manifests itself. Any other ones, Ryan?
Yeah, Alex. So we have someone from an insurance provider here. They are saying they have 50 bots deployed in their business today, and they're curious, could this be applied to their existing RPA implementation? And if so, how?
Yeah, it's another good one. So I think I briefly alluded to that when we talked about loading data. We've actually just recently released capability along with Blue Prism to automatically or in real time ingest data from bots. And we know that anybody with any kind of a relatively sizable automation or digital workforce, it takes effort to keep your eyes on those type of digital workers, and maybe even FTE time, right, for somebody to be monitoring that in some kind of a control center. So absolutely, we can have this tool do just that for you. I can even open up a project here, if you'll bear with me, that has an example where we've brought in events directly from robotics. The nice thing here, we know where the data exists out of your Blue Prism logs, or we can get it via that real-time integration, and we know that it records all the data points that we're looking for, right? And so here's just an example of a timeline revolving around a specific robot. And now when you think about this, there's a couple of different ways to use this for analysis. First and foremost, you can do it just like this. Let's just put this on top of our Blue Prism implementation and make sure we're getting the best type of efficiency out of our robots, and if not, let's do some analysis and understand where we can fix or make an efficiency gain. Okay. And then secondarily, the ability to commingle these robotically executed steps with the more manual parts of your process really starts to show you where maybe people are missing handshakes between humans and technology, where things, maybe getting held down in RPA that you didn't expect should be happening, right? Where you're seeing a bottleneck actually within, these things actually occur within the automated parts of the process. So giving you that full picture along with this ability to just segment a project and analysis specifically around Blue Prism, and then use that monitoring and alerting to notify you if you're not hitting those goals. So that capability is here, and here's just a little example of that.
Great. So I have a few more, Alex. This is another one that says, I've noticed that you call yourself process intelligence. You've mentioned business intelligence and process mining. And we have a significant investment in BI tools. So how is this any different from the BI tools or even process mining?
Joe, you want to jump in for that one, maybe? Joe, I think you might be muted if you're talking. If not, I can certainly take it. Okay, so I'll go through it quickly. This tool is totally designed to supplement your existing BI infrastructure, right? By no means, and Joe alluded to it. We come from a BI background. The co-founders of this company, Joe and I, both worked for them previously, so we understand almost everybody has multiple implementations of BI within their organization already, right? This is totally designed to supplement that and answer questions I hope that you've seen thus far that you simply cannot get. This temporal series of events that BI just does have any idea about. BI is really, really good and powerful at giving you kind of point in time, single data point, discrete metrics, and trending it over time. Okay, but what it really can't do is tell you anything about what you've seen today, which is process quality, which is linking together a temporal series of events in conjunction to a process instance. And so when you think about robotic process automation, the two kind of lend themselves to each other, even in the name. That's what we're trying to analyze. So by no means should we be thinking about ripping and replacing a BI tool, right? This is totally designed to supplement your existing data analysis efforts. Not only that, but do it much more quickly and a much more much less data intensive way than a BI tool would ask you to do.
Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I was frantically trying to get off mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're good. So if you have anything else you want to say about that, if not, we can move on. It does seem like there are a few other questions.
I think Alex gave a good answer, so by all means, move on.
Wonderful. So this person is struggling to find their processes in their pre-RPA implementation. So how could they get started in doing that?
Well, effectively, their pre-RPA implementation is the discovery and assessment capability. It's around really that identification, prioritization, and justification of which projects you're going to take on. And we really kind of enforce the fact that we don't want to do 1 or 2 process assessments. We want to do 20 or 30 and then start building out a laundry list of opportunities for automation. So again, this is around increasing decreasing the time to value of our automation projects and doing more with the same amount of people. So realistically, our process discovery, and we've actually introduced a process discovery pack that can support Blue Prism and its customer base on automate or on their journey to automation by allowing them to do that assessment. So I engage with Timeline to understand more about the process discovery pack for Blue Prism.
So Joe, as you're saying that, there seems to be some other questions that are dropping in here in regards to that. Is that the fact that some of these pre-RPA implementations, as well as how to get started in their current endeavors, what systems perhaps would these be working with? Is there a number of systems? You've mentioned a lot about Blue Prism, but others are curious about other systems or other RPA providers, such as UiPath, Automation Anywhere. So we have some guests here today. that would like to sort of get started but aren't sure if it's just for these?
Well, I mean, I'd hand over to Alex for a technical.
Yeah, sorry, Joe, I think you're breaking up. Yeah, from the technical perspective, and I think you might have even seen it as I went through the demonstration, this tool can be really, really useful for the bookends of automation, and right in the lens of this discussion. But it does go far beyond that to just overall process optimization and efficiency and compliance. And there's a number of different lenses you can take a look at this through. What I will say is, from a data perspective, we've got automated connectors for a couple of cloud applications, since this application does sit in the cloud, specifically ServiceNow and Salesforce.com. Any other relational type of a data store, database, data transaction log that would accept a JDBC type of a connection, so mostly any type of big name database provider, and we're even working on connections to things like SAP and Oracle. But we can get data out of those types of data stores, provided that we know that they're just recording those 3 key fields that I mentioned at the top. Just an audit trail of the things that happened in the system of record. So by no means is this exclusive to really any single kind of application provider or database. The idea would be, let's expand to all the different systems and data sources that support the process to give you a full picture.
Okay, there's a few more questions, but I think that's going to wrap up our hour here. So any further questions, we will reach out directly. Some of them did seem to be specific use cases and specific to users. So we'll follow up with that. The next steps will be, we'll follow up. You'll have a recording of this webinar today. You can share with your colleagues. It'll be available almost immediately, as well as everyone today. And as always, we provide a 30-day free trial so you can get started seeing how process intelligence will help you and your organization in your digital transformation initiatives. As Joe had mentioned, currently a promotion running up until March 31st, this first quarter in 2019, exclusive offer for digital transformation RPA initiatives to help you get started, a discovery pack that is going to accelerate your digital transformation initiatives. If you're fearful of what process intelligence is or what it could do for your organization, this is a really easy way to get started with 100% support from Timeline PI, getting your endeavor off the ground and getting you started in your digital transformation initiatives, making sure that you're successful this year. So if you have any other further questions or direct inquiries, the chat box, that little orange dot in the bottom right corner, will remain active. But at this point, we will discontinue the broadcast. We'll reach out to everyone who attended today with an offer for the free trial, as well as the exclusive RPA discovery pack, and give you more information about what we're doing along that. I appreciate everyone coming out today, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you.